Okay, hi Nathaniel again for Vivivor Scavenger Hunt Challenge, but this time for a shirt with a shirt. And this time I am doing a rant about my favorite Survivor season for 10 minutes. And my favorite season of Survivor is Heroes vs. Villains Season 20. Overall, a very solid cast. But the first villainous act was not dislocating Stephanie's shoulder. Yeah, that was the first thing that happened, was breaking Stephanie's shoulder. That was not the first villainous act. No. My argument for the first villainous act of the season was the helicopters. And why was it the helicopters? It wasn't a villain that made the move. It was production. It was sending in the helicopter onto the beach, knocking sand into people's eyes. Like, they're lucky no one got a scratched cornea. Like, oh, a scratched cornea. That doesn't sound too bad. But no, you don't want to know what a scratched cornea does? You could go blind with that due to an eye infection. Now, you tell me that's not villainous. Now, like, the first great thing that season was Sandra undoing Sugar's bra. And then Sugar just comes back towards Sandra and just flips her off. Good times. But the first surprise of the season was voting off Sugar. Sugar was just a surprise, and she got caught in the crossfire of, like, the two people vying for power between, like, JT and Tom. Just an unfortunate blow and blunder. Another unfortunate early out was Suri. Suri is, like, the Survivor mom. The Survivor couch potato, which, you know, it's very rude that Jeff still called her, like, a couch potato all the way back to Game Changers. Like, I get that. That's, like, reasonable for her first season. Like, she already got off the couch and did it her first time in Survivor Exile Island. And then Suri came back off the couch again for Fans versus Favorites. Okay, kind of could see her still maybe kind of going by the whole couch potato thing. But the third time on Heroes vs. Villains, why are you still calling her couch potato, Jeff? And then again in Game Changers, I don't get it. One vote out that wasn't disappointing for an early vote was Randy, Resident Old Man. It was kind of forgettable that season. But then, like, the big vote outs before the merge, like Boston Rob, Coach, and Tyson. Funny enough, I don't really like Boston Rob and Tyson. Tyson just feels like an arrogant prick. Like, I don't know if it's just for TV, but he looks like the type of person that I would not want to be alone on an island for 39 days. And Boston Rob is very unbearable to watch because he's the same arrogant person every single time. Coach is cool. I like Coach. But I think the most disappointing villain of Heroes vs. Villains was Courtney. I loved Courtney in China. She was just her one-liners and her confessionals. I would watch a season of Survivor where it's just Courtney complaining about everyone for 39 days. So basically Survivor China too. What else? Rupert. Rupert's an interesting person. Wait, no, before we go to Rupert, we're going to talk about Stephanie. Which, I don't blame the heroes, especially led by JT, for wanting to vote out Stephanie, because in Survivor Palau, Stephanie was the last surviving member of her team on one of the worst teams of Survivor to ever exist. And then Stephanie comes back to play in Guatemala. Well, I think she only did better by like 2 immunity wins, tribal immunity wins, compared to 0. So she goes on teams that suck. So I don't blame her team for being, girl, you're cursed. Go home. Bye-bye. But yeah, back to Rupert. Rupert kind of had a disappointing showing in Heroes vs. Villains. It felt less Rupert-esque, because you had Pirate Rupert and Pearl Islands and stealing shoes and fishing. And then you had Rupert and All Stars, who was still Mr. Fisherman. sorry. Here. I'm not restarting. But I think Rupert's best showing was when his wife Laura showed up for the family visit. You can really see how much Rupert loves his wife. Up until then, for the family visit, that was like the one where I wasn't crying right away. But just looking in Rupert's eyes as to how much he loves Laura got me in tears. And then when Rupert lost the immunity challenge and had to say goodbye to Laura, you could just see the disappointment in his eyes, and yet how much he loved his dear, dear wife. It was just very endearing and sweet. And I think the hero that I disliked the least overall for heroes versus villains and outside of the hero's tribe, and I think that person is Colby. Like, I don't get the appeal people had of him, like, 22 years ago. Like, naming your children after him? Like, no. I don't see even how women were saying he was handsome. Like, he is not my type. And even then, it's like he was so arrogant. Like, oh, I'm the hero. Like, shut up. You should not have gotten as far in the game as you did. Like, 5th place? Honey, no, you did not deserve it. Then there's Parvati. It's very interesting with her because Rupert thought he had control of Parvati, but Parvati is the one who really had control because Rupert gave Parvati JT's idol from the Heroes tribe, which, Rupert, why would you give Parvati an idol? Which he then used to save Jerry and Sandra. Which I wonder if it's pronounced Sandra or Sandra, because I've heard Jeff say Sandra, but everyone else says Sandra. I don't know if it's just like wherever Jeff's from and it's just his accent, but part of the rant. Yeah, she had much less control than she did in Fans vs. Favorites without her Black Widow Brigade, which I wonder if she would have held much more control in the merge if, like, people like Cerie and Courtney survived. Who else? Oh, Jerry Manfield. She's a very underrated player that season. She's the type of person where I would like to see her come back in the modern Survivor game. Like, if Jerry were to come back for a 4th season, I don't think Jerry would do very well with the modern twist, but I think she would hold her own for the social aspect. Which, as this 10 minutes is starting to come to an end, the next person I would like to talk about is Russell Hands. Probably, for sure, my top 10 least favorite survivors, maybe top 5. And the reason I dislike him so much comes from Samoa. So season 19 of Survivor. And a lot of the time, people on Survivor, the friendships that they are building, you can tell, like, hey, I like you. I'm probably going to have to vote you out in this game. But after we get out of this game, we can still be friends. But that was not the case with Russell. He brought in Shambo, who was a flip from her old tribe. And at one point, Russell said, her friendship to me is meaningless, which I absolutely despise from Russell. He, instead of seeing people he could become friends with and talk to and enjoy their company, all he sees with those people is, how can you get me through the next vote? How can you get me to the end? And by the time Russell gets to the end, he has burnt bridges with the entire jury. Like, that's why Russell lost in Heroes vs. Villains, despite probably playing the best game there. like with the heroes, like you have Rupert and Candace and Colby. He all promised them the world, but they all sat on the jury. He promised Jerry final three. Jerry was on the jury. Russell was so self-centered by final five that he thought he would win, that he was too arrogant to realize he was going to lose. But anyways, Sandra's my favorite player. I'm glad she won. The queen stays queen. Goodbye.